many of you, just show of hands, would say you're relatively familiar, maybe not academically, but you've read it. If I looked in your Bible, you got a couple different highlight colors. You like the Proverbs. How many of you are like a proverb a day for a month kind of people, and you've read through them that way before? Okay, cool. So we have some familiarity with Proverbs. And I want to tell you there's something interesting, because when we think of Proverbs, we usually think of chapters 10 through 31, not chapters 1 through 9. Chapters 1 through 9 are a series of speeches, and a lot of scholars believe that those first 9 chapters are actually kind of the preface to prepare your heart to receive what are technically the Proverbs, which we think of as these like phrases, these riddles, these sorts of things that we get in chapters 10 through 31. So this is what we're going to do. I have gone back and forth. There are how many chapters in Proverbs? 31. I kind of went back and forth. Are we going to do 31 weeks in Proverbs? And I was telling Mark beforehand, when you really jump into Proverbs and you start reading it, one of the things you'll notice is that there are a couple themes, and it seems to be like a game of how many different ways can we express the exact same theme in a different, creative, beautiful way. So in that way, they're kind of repetitive. And so for me, at least, going verse by verse, I think it's not a waste of our time, but I think we can get at the core of Proverbs faster than just doing a proverb a week. So this is what we're going to do. Every week, I'm going to prepare a chunk, and we're going to kind of go chronologically through. But I want to encourage you to fill in the gaps. And the way that you'll do that is, as we get a routine going, I'll let you know where we're going next, and then you'll know which chapters you could kind of read to fill in the gaps of those chapters. Does that make sense? Okay, so that is what we're going to do. Tonight, before we get into Proverbs chapter 1, we need to just talk about the basics. What is Proverbs? Where did it come from? What's it about? All of those sorts of questions. So here's the bottom line of Proverbs. Proverbs is one of 3 books in the Old Testament that is referred to as wisdom literature. Now, we have to have a good conversation about what this word wisdom even means, because we look at it and we think certain things in English that maybe is not what it means in Hebrew. We're going to get there in a second. What are the 3 wisdom literature books of the Old Testament? Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. Okay, I've heard a few. I've heard Lamentations. I've heard Psalms, Song of Solomon. There are kind of like these concentric circles of like what is wisdom literature and what is kind of Psalms or poetry or songs, and they do kind of overlap. But generally speaking, almost every list of wisdom literature will say that these are the 3 explicitly books of wisdom. Okay, so what is the point of putting all of these up in a study that's about Proverbs? Here's the deal, is that Jews did not believe that books were to be just taken separately one at a time. Have you ever noticed how much Jews focus on the Torah? What is the Torah? It's the first 5 books. You notice how, like, even in the Bible, even if you've ever read anything about even modern day Jews, they don't ever really reference the book of Genesis. Have you noticed this? They reference what? The Torah. Why? Because the Torah is an accumulated whole. It all goes together. To understand Genesis fully, you also need to know Exodus. And to know Deuteronomy, you also need to know Leviticus. And so they go together. And this is the same with wisdom literature. These 3, to fully grasp what I would say is the Old Testament vision of wisdom, which is God's view of wisdom, we have to know all 3 of these. And so there are some key differences, and I want to point these out. I stole this just verbatim straight from the Bible Project Tim Mackey. If you're a fan, you're welcome. If you're not, sorry. He described it this way. Proverbs is the brilliant, thoughtful, and successful parental-like teacher, gentle and kind, but also strong. When I hear this word strong and I think Proverbs is not softening the edges of sin. It's very direct. Sin will lead you down a path towards destruction and death. And this is how you walk in wisdom, that you would live a life worthy of who God has called you to be. There's a lot of phrases. There's a lot of fun. There's riddles. When you read it, some of it makes you scratch your head because you're thinking, I want to stop here and figure out what does this mean. It's fun. It draws you in. Ecclesiastes, he described this way. Ecclesiastes is the witty professional critic who's been trained to recognize the follies and ironies of life. Anybody ever read Ecclesiastes before? What is the famous phrase from Ecclesiastes? Vanity, vanity. It's all vanity, right? What does he say? Life, I've looked around, I've watched people's life. It's kind of like wheat. It grows up and then it just dries out and blows away with the wind. And if you just read Ecclesiastes, what would you leave feeling like? You'd be feeling like pessimistic and man, right? And then this third book, we don't often think of it as wisdom literature, the book of Job. He described this way: Job is the weathered, beleaguered old sea captain. He has the scars to show and many years of experience to draw perspective from. This might be what we would call as like anecdotal evidence. You ever hear that phrase used? People are like, oh, that's not science, that's just anecdotal. But Job is saying, look, I've lived the life. I can speak from the authority of my experience because I've lived it. I think I put it out of order, but if you have your outline, you could flip a few pages away. It's either the next page or the following. Let me find it here. It's right before that section that says modern Proverbs. It's how does the Proverbs fit with the other wisdom literature? I think this is where we can wrap up before we move on to just talking about Proverbs. I've been reading for the last month or so about Proverbs, and this is kind of what I've come up with. Proverbs says, this is the way that you should live your life so that you maximize God's plan for your life and live out the blueprint God has created for your flourishing. This is what Proverbs is all about. What is this world all about, and how do we live in it that we would be good at life? How many of you want to be good at life? This is not like prosperity, gospel-y stuff. This is the wisdom of God of how do you live with integrity and character in a world that doesn't value those things. The second thing I wrote is this: Ecclesiastes says to Proverbs, what you have said is generally true, but I would like to point out how sin and brokenness ruin even those who live with wisdom. You do see that sometimes life is completely random and seemingly unpredictable at every turn, right? How many of you would say that you've had moments in your faith where you're like, I'm reading my Bible every day, I'm being more faithful than I've ever been, and life is just getting harder? Anybody ever had that experience? And what is in our human DNA? What is our first reaction to that? To ball up your fist and do what? Right? Do you notice? Do you notice how good I'm doing? Why is this happening to me? So Ecclesiastes is pointing out that, hey, sometimes there's some really wicked, terrible people and stuff goes really good for them. Would you say amen to that? Yeah. Job says to Ecclesiastes, I can relate with your points more than any other person who ever lived. And yet, despite what appears to be insurmountable tragedies and difficulties, living with the true fear of the Lord does, over time, lead to an abundance of understanding, perspective, and life. And this is, in Jewish understanding, this collectively is the wisdom of God. Proverbs sets forth the wisdom that God intended for human flourishing. Ecclesiastes points out that even if you live that way, sin still does rear its ugly head from time to time. And Job is there to tell you, even when it does, do not veer from the path because God will be faithful. Just continue putting one foot in front of the other. Is that cool or what? So this is all to tell you, if you have the time and you want to, I would encourage you to read Proverbs, read ahead, but I'd also encourage you to read Ecclesiastes and Job, because the three go together. They were never meant to be pulled apart. Any questions from here? Cool. Okay, we got some really basic, fundamental questions to answer. So let's just do the basics really quick. Who wrote Proverbs? Okay, I've written it there for you. Right from the beginning, these are the Proverbs of Solomon. We know, biblically speaking, that world leaders come from all over. What's happening? Come on up. World leaders come from all over the known world to come visit Solomon because of what? His wisdom. He has accumulated all this wisdom and he has understood who God is. He's been trained up. Does that mean that because you know the wisdom of God that you are free from sin and faltering? No. So I want us to remember this because this is important. Solomon, I would argue, in some sense, falls in love with wisdom. Falling in love with wisdom, even falling in love with the wisdom of God, is not falling in love with God, and therefore it is idolatry. How many of you know that we are really good in our culture about accumulating information? Would you agree? A pastor, it was actually yesterday, came and spoke to us, and he made this observation that the two things that our entire culture is really good at is accumulating information and binging things. And he said, that's always true. That's who we are. Even in your conversations, you might notice, maybe it's not you, but you notice people who, you're like, I'm not really feeling like we're talking to each other. We're just kind of like exchanging information that we saw on TV or read in the newspaper. You know that feeling? And we're really good at that, and we're really good at accumulating it quickly. And that's good for information's sake. We have more access to information than we have ever had before. I would say in the ancient equivalent, Solomon had more access to information than anyone ever. Why? He could send out an invitation to a queen in Africa, which literally happens, right? And she comes to give him all the wisdom she has, but also to hear all of the wisdom he has. Just because we have that does not mean that we are drawing close to the Lord, which is a warning to us. As we study wisdom and want to live lives of wisdom, the first thing that we're going to hear tonight in Proverbs chapter 1 is you want to be wise? The first step is what? Fear of the Lord. Don't forget it. He's actually going to say it. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, you guys know that one? What does that say? Do not lean on your own understanding. Does anybody know what verse 7 says? Be not wise in your own eyes, but fear the Lord. Why does he say that? Because every human being, as we accumulate wisdom and knowledge, guess what happens to us if we're not careful? We begin to puff, and we begin to think, I'm smarter than that guy. I'm smarter than that girl. And before we know it, what have we done? We've turned ourselves into something that we think is worthy of worship. So that is the whole key. We're going to get there. Okay, so Solomon wrote a great deal of the Proverbs. Many of the ones that aren't even necessarily blatantly written by him were probably from him and accumulated by others. A couple other things. There's a few Proverbs, and we'll get there. Agur and King Lemuel. Lemuel literally means in Hebrew, for God. So many scholars think there's no such thing as King Lemuel. It's probably just another name for King Solomon. So we're not here to argue those sorts of things. Let's see, time frame. Solomon's reign began right around 970 to 930 BC, about a 40-year reign, give or take. Very interesting that most scholars believe the book that we know of as Proverbs, probably in scrolls, was probably not compiled until 200 or 300 years later. There's actually Proverbs chapter 25 mentions King Hezekiah's men came upon the wisdom of Solomon and they brought it all together. So many think this is probably just the description of the moment when what we know as Proverbs came together. Now, if that is an issue, so if you think, wow, what does it mean that these Proverbs just kind of existed out there for 200 or 300 years before someone compiled them, I would say this. How many pieces of wisdom can you think of that are 300 years old? If you can think of any, it's only the stuff that's worthy of lasting, isn't it? It's only the stuff that's time-tested by real humans in real time, and it works. So I would say King Solomon's wisdom, if it lasted 200 or 300 years and King Hezekiah, the king, says, we got to compile this, is enough for me. Okay, now we're going to get into the good stuff. What is wisdom? Talk about what wisdom is and what wisdom is not, but first, let's take a little break so we can spit on each other. In Hebrew, this word is, anybody know it? Chokmah. It's like you're hawking a loogie. I would encourage you to turn to a neighbor. Chokmah. Chokmah, yeah? I think if you wanted to get it in English, I would say it kind of looks like this. Chokmah. With kind of a soft C in there, like that. Not choke ma. That would not be good. Don't choke your ma. Chokmah. Okay, so that is wisdom. So what is wisdom? I think what we can start with maybe as the negative is what isn't wisdom? When you think of wisdom, not maybe what you've learned or think is the right answer, what would you say the common person in 2024 would say, hey, you guy on the street or you gal at my work, what do you think wisdom is? What do you think people would say? Knowledge, intelligence, experience. What is it? Okay, elderly, so there's like an age component. Anything else? Maybe like somebody who has lots of information. Now, all of these things in and of themselves are not wisdom. And there is an element of wisdom that is lacking from all of this that we have to get right or we will miss it. Because I think the best way to describe what wisdom is it's the ability to translate great knowledge and truth into the proper application that God desires. So let me give you a couple examples. This word is actually often used for craftsmen in the Old Testament. This is somebody who has been given a raw material. Let's just, for the sake of common experience, maybe a carpenter, a master carpenter is given a piece of wood. Anybody know anything about wood and craftsmanship? What is one of the first things they're going to do if they're looking for wood? Maybe this person knows, like, I want to see what the grain looks like, right? I want to see how much moisture is in that wood or how dry it is. How old is this wood? What could this wood... So a master who has the raw materials in their hands is said to have chokmah. Why? Because they have the raw material, but they also know how to use it properly to make something beautiful. Does that make sense? So the idea of wisdom is that Solomon has compiled these proverbs, which is the raw material, and the wise person will put it into use. They will take the raw material, they will put it into use, and what will become beautiful out of it? You. Isn't that cool? So here's how one person I was listening to this week kept describing it. Proverbs is about how you could be good at life. Not good in the sense of like, I want a promotion, I want a big bank account, I want to look cool on Instagram. Not that. But you could be good at life in the way that God intended you to live your life. You could be faithful. You could be the husband faithfully to one wife forever. You could do that. You could be a coworker who says, you know what, I'm going to forego a raise because I prefer to tell the truth than to lie. You could be that person, and that is the goal of Proverbs, to be good at life in the way God created life to be. A couple other things, because there are some nuances. We talked about the human kind of tendency to begin worshiping and idolizing wisdom. So here's a couple things I think we need to know. What is a proverb? A proverb is literally just a phrase. It's a phrase that just sets forth and describes wisdom. So I'll give you an example here. Usually in the Hebrew language, the first word or two of a book is just what they name the book. So Genesis, what does Genesis mean? In English, if you just had to translate Genesis, what is it? In the beginning, or beginning things, right? So Proverbs of Solomon, it says right in verse 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. The Proverbs literally mean, here are the phrases and the wisdom that has been compiled. It's written down wisdom. That's what it literally means. Okay, talk about a couple last things here. Actually, a handful. Just while I'm erasing, somebody who's read Proverbs, maybe you've even done it recently, what kind of topics get covered in Proverbs? Money. True. How do you use your money in the way God intended? Women. Yeah. We're going to get the speech right from the start where it's presented as a father writing a letter or writing wisdom to the son. You think a father with integrity and character has some things to say about women to his son? Man, some things just haven't changed, have they? What else? Discipline. Discipline, parenting. Parenting, all kinds of behavior, relationships. Moral truths. Moral truth. What is it? Laziness and work. Oh, yeah, absolutely on that. I was listening to a guy talking about difficult proverbs, and there's a proverb, I can't remember where it's at. It's basically the one who has a full, basically poop bucket for oxen is successful. And it was like, what? What does this mean? It's like a riddle. But the idea is that the one who owns an oxen will yield a great harvest. That's the second line of the proverb. The idea is, hey, there is a trade-off of somebody who's saying, look, I want to work really hard and produce an abundant harvest. Maybe you're like someone who's like, I want to start a company that blesses many people and employs lots of people. It also comes with the responsibility of cleaning up some messes, doesn't it? You see how that works? So there's these riddles in there, but I was listening to that and I thought, this is the beauty of Proverbs. You're like, what on earth does that mean? It's kind of disgusting. And then you do some digging and you realize it's supposed to be disgusting. Because literally what it's saying is there's some blank to clean up when you are the person taking responsibility to produce a lot of stuff that will bless a lot of people. Sometimes it comes with some flack and some drama. So if you want to be that person, just know there's some messes that will have to be cleaned up along the way. That's a good proverb. Let's talk a little bit about the themes and the style. So this is what I wanted us to see. Proverbs literally touches on every single aspect of human life. Every aspect. It even hits things like drinking and addiction. It talks about use of your time, not stealing time from your employer, all these sorts of things. Every single thing that touches on human flourishing is in the book of Proverbs, and it's there on purpose. I think this is, it's not just wisdom that's spiritual. This is what I want you to see, is that God is interested in what we might call street smarts. Do you know what I mean by street smarts? I grew up in a very, very small town, a little gold rush town in Northern California between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe. Not a lot of street smarts going on when you grow up in a place like that. Because the second you go to a big city, anybody else from a small town? Can you remember the first time you went to like a real big city and the feeling that you had? What was the feeling you had, Bo? They talk too fast. They walk too fast. I don't belong here. Anybody ever got off the subway for the first time onto the street in like Manhattan? And you just realize, well, this is like a different thing. Everybody walks fast. They got their head down. They got places to go. They're carrying like everybody's got like an official briefcase. They're like, do it. And so there's an intelligence of like, just how do you navigate that world? Proverbs is even interested in how you navigate walking down the sidewalk and interacting with people. So it's not just the spiritual sense, but also street smarts. I want to talk about one last thing, and then we're going to get into really the foundation of what Proverbs is before we get to chapter 1. Because this is, I'd say, the argument or the claim that Proverbs is making. I don't know if I put it in your outline. Do you have 3 boxes that say number 1, 2, and 3? Maybe not. Maybe I just wrote that for myself. Okay, spoiler alert. Chapter 1 is going to end its first introduction and say, look, from this point forward, it's in verse 7, you should stop reading because you won't understand any of this properly unless you have a proper fear of the Lord. That is the foundation for understanding Proverbs, and we're going to talk about what that means in a second. But before I do, this is what I want you to know. This is what Proverbs is claiming. If you have proper fear of the Lord, I spent a lot of time thinking about this. Proper fear of the Lord gives you a couple things. When you have fear of the Lord, you understand who God is and you understand who you are. Is this making sense? And if you understand who God is and you understand who you are, then there is never a temptation for you to try to sit on the throne that only God belongs in. Does that make sense? So the reason we're always fearing the Lord, we'll talk about what that means in a couple minutes, is because it puts us in right perspective to Him. So if we have proper fear of God, Proverbs says, we will get wisdom. We will be able to receive wisdom, and when we receive wisdom, we can live, I I'm just going to say with character, but this is character, integrity, spiritual discipline, all of those things. If we properly fear God, we are now in the place where we can actually receive his wisdom and live in the way that he desires for us to live. Does that make sense? And then the final claim is this: if we do that, we will more or less live with integrity, and we will be good at life. This is the flow of how Proverbs works. Of course, Ecclesiastes comes in and says, wait a second, it's not that cut and dry. It's not that simple. Sometimes people don't fear God at all. They think they're God. They have no wisdom whatsoever, and the life goes great for them. Proverbs and Ecclesiastes actually has an answer for this, and it says, it might seem like it's going well for them, but there's something called eternity. And it won't always be that. I think in some ways that's what Ecclesiastes is saying. Life, even the most beautiful stalk of wheat, dries out and blows away with the wind. Okay, are we on the same page? Okay, this is going to be the last push, and then we're going to, we'll take a little breather, and then we'll jump into Proverbs chapter 1 and see if we can see some of these things come to life. Okay. This is a few weeks ago. We were at the end of Ephesians. I can't even remember the topic. We went on a philosophical rant. Do you remember this? Anybody was here? I can't remember what we talked about. Anybody remember that conversation? So glad you remember my teaching that well. What an honor it is. Whoa, sorry. Every now and then we go on these. So I want to talk about this concept in philosophy called the moral universe. Because this is at the core of what the Bible says wisdom is. And if we don't touch on this, we're going to leave thinking, oh, okay, so wisdom is that we get really good godly information, then we put it into action. Sounds straightforward enough. But this does not get to the heart of what wisdom, according to the Bible, really is. The moral universe is simply this: that God has created not just you and not just me, but all things in a way that when they operate the way he intended, the moral sense, then God's world flourishes. Can you remember a time in the Bible when everything flourished exactly according to God's plan? The Garden of Eden. And what was the temptation of Eve? You could be like God. So we've talked about this. What does it mean that you could be like God? You could know everything because you're going to be eating from the tree of knowledge and good and evil, right? So what is the idea? The temptation is that you could determine what is right and wrong for yourself. And if you did that, then what would you need God for? You would be like him. Does that make sense? Our furthest ancestor has struggled with this for all time, and it is in our DNA that we would like to determine what is good and evil for ourselves, and the second we do that is the second we boot God off the throne and say, we got it from here. So, the moral universe, the first thing is this, is that God has determined what is good and evil. That means that there will be times and situations where we say, like, I just don't get it. Anybody ever read through the Bible and think, like, I just don't get it, God? That is not the time to say, I think God was wrong on this one. I'll step in. This is the time to say, you know what? I would rather have some questions that I can't answer right now than answers that I'm not allowed to question. Does that make sense? So God determines good and evil. This is at the core of the moral universe. The moral universe is like this, that God has a blueprint for how things should be, and it's almost like gravity. Can you see gravity? No. But once you kind of acknowledge and understand what gravity is, you look around and you think like, wow, everything is impacted by it. Does that make sense? It's the same with the wisdom of God. Once you begin to see what God's wisdom is and what foolishness, its opposite, looks like, and you're training your eye to see it, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, it's governing everything. Let me give you an example. How many of you would say that over time you've had social interactions and you would say you've gotten better at beginning to read relationships of like, I bet that's a woman of great integrity. I can just tell. You feel like you've gotten better at that in time? Most people would say, I've gotten better in time. Why is that? Because as you follow Jesus, I would say, you're beginning to see that there are laws governing the universe that God put in place. It's the moral universe. He created it that way. And you're beginning to see and understand all these things. How many of you have seen a situation that maybe is getting praised on the news and you're like, I can't pinpoint why, but I feel like there's a great evil undergirding that. Yeah. Even though maybe I can't quite describe it. It's that you're beginning to see that there is a blueprint that governs all things. And even though you can't see it necessarily with your eyes, you begin to recognize its force with you. So this is the law of, I would call, cause and effect. And Proverbs is very, very strong on this. You live with integrity and character, and what happens? Good stuff. Does that mean always good stuff? No, but the claim of Proverbs is in time, the one who lives with integrity and character. Maybe you got reamed at your last job and fired, and it was unjust. But if you just keep living with character and integrity, what's the idea? That things will turn out well for you. It might take time, but in general, things will turn out well for you. Are we gathering all this? Okay, here's one that Jesus says. This is actually a proverb, how it's written on the page in Greek. The one who wants to sow a great harvest must do what? Plant seed. Is planting seed hard work or easy? Hard, right? You reap what you sow. How many of you know that proverb? Is that proverb more or less true? Is it possible that you spend tons of time reaping seed into the ground and then the harvest isn't that good? Of course it's possible, but if you put in all the hard work up front over and over and over, year in and year out, what will the overall outcome be? Okay, cool, we got it. So here's the idea, that those who possess this kind of wisdom, they will make themselves obvious over time. They're not always vindicated or successful by worldly standards. That's important, by worldly standards in the short term. But in the long term, they are clearly people who know and trust the Lord. Why? Because wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord. The last thing is this. The opposite of wisdom is foolishness. I want to flip forward because I don't want to misspeak. This word, this might be interesting to you Bible nerds. By the way, how many of you, when you hear that, you don't think it's a bad thing? You would like to be called that? Cool. Okay, so we have this word in English. It's the opposite of fool. It's the opposite of wisdom. It's fool or foolish. This word as a noun, fool, is a very interesting word because in Hebrew, transliterated, it actually turns into an English word, and we literally get our English word. It's, let me make sure I pronounce it correctly. It's ev-eel. Anybody? Evil. What does it mean to be evil? It means to be the opposite of wise. It means to be the person who trusts in your own understanding over and over. And what is the outcome of doing that over and over time? You bring destruction and death and darkness with you. That is what is evil in the eyes of the Lord. It's often contrast with the righteous versus the evil. The person who lives outside of God's will, usually intentionally and on purpose. Okay. Last thing I want to tell you, and then we're going to take a little break. Proverbs is the book of Proverbs. It is not the book of promises, which is very important in wisdom literature. Because are these sayings true? Yes. Are they always unequivocally true in the short term? Not necessarily. They are accumulated wisdom that over generations of Hebrew experience have fleshed out as these are the moral things that we can wrap our arms around and say, if we live by these things, life will go well for us. We will be good at life. Okay, so here's where we could take a break. There is a list of 10 modern proverbs there. I would like you just to take a moment, maybe just pick two of them. I'll give you literally like 90 seconds. And I'd like you to pick two, maybe three, and then just jot down what is the general idea, like what does it mean? So don't bite the hand that feeds you. What does that mean? Just, what does it mean? Yeah, don't try to punish the one who's giving things that you need. That's what that means. So take 90 seconds in your group. I'm going to go get a drink. Then we'll come back because I want us to get into the mindset of how do we read a proverb and then extrapolate what is the interpretation of what it means. Ready, set, go. Okay, for the sake of time, let's draw together. Even if you just did one, that's okay. Now, this is not an exercise of we agree with these, by the way. These are not, hey, these are modern secular proverbs. We have to agree with them. That's not the exercise. The exercise is we can read them and extrapolate what the general meaning is. Whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant. So how about a couple? Strike while the iron is hot. What does that mean? Yeah, Breck.
It means you got a limited time frame of a big opportunity and you just jam everything you got into it before it goes away.
Man. Everything is coming together. It's the right time. I got to push all the chips to the center, right? Okay, how about this one? If you play with fire, you will get burned. What's that mean?
Do something dangerous, you're going to get hurt.
Yeah. If you do something dangerous, you're going to get hurt. There's also another kind of nuance is that if you kind of make light or play with something that's very powerful, you're bound to receive its power in a negative way when you don't treat it with the respect it deserves. Interesting. Those, wise people don't throw pearls to swines. Yeah, that's literally a proverb. Okay, how about this one? The early bird gets the worm. Early bird gets the worm. What's that mean?
Kind of like don't let opportunities pass you up.
Okay, kinda. Yeah, the one who's up, ready to rock and roll, is ready to hit the day running, is gonna win. Right? Yeah. Okay. So, again, this is not we agree with these proverbs. It's just our culture has created proverbs, and I want us to know that we're going to go to this book of the Bible. Sometimes we think of like ancient literature, and we think like it's weird, it's different, we're not used to it. But we actually are used to it. We just have different types of proverbs. So I think we got it. Okay, Proverbs chapter 1. Here's the goal. The goal is we're going to read bigger chunks, and we're going to pause periodically. My hope is not to do a ton of teaching tonight, but to agreed. I'm not going to do a lot of teaching. That's what I was saying. I hear that. But I'm just going to point out a few things, and then my hope is to leave you with a point or two and then set you free at your table to discuss some things. So, Proverb 1. This is one of those issues. Is it Proverbs 1 or just we're on Proverb 1? How many of you are like plural, just use the name of the book? Proverbs 1. Okay. Are you consistent in that if we go to Psalms, however? No. Okay. Little conundrum. Okay. This is the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. So what are we being told right off the bat? This book comes with a stamp of approval, and it's not just any stamp of approval. It is a great stamp of approval. This is a stamp of approval that stands the test of time through all Jewish culture for generations, pre-exile, post-exile. If it's got the stamp of David or Solomon on it, it is the real thing. What is the purpose of compiling these proverbs? They tell us to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing. How many of you would say when you have wisdom, it's much easier to teach somebody else all about it than to receive what somebody else is going to teach you? Yeah, there's a little bit of a pride check when there's somebody who knows more about it than you. In righteousness, justice, and equity. To give prudence to the simple. What does that mean? Give prudence to the simple. Everyone's got a smartphone in here and an internet connection. At least just look it up. It's not Sunday church. Get on your web browser if you have to. What does it mean, prudence? Keep it simple. What else does it mean? Just want to make sure. Isaac, you looking it up? Yeah. It's to give simple, basic instruction to who? To the simple. Is it not true that God has gifted us each in different ways? Do you know that, well, maybe you don't, but I feel like there's actually this weird, like, cancerous thing going on where we want to pretend that everyone is equally gifted and equipped to do certain things. You know that that's not true, right? There are just blatantly people who are just, like, so wise and intelligent. They just are. And there are people that's just not how they're wired. They prefer the simple things. Is there any difference in the amount of faith and obedience God has called those two people to? No, absolutely not. But we all know people, maybe we are those people who say, you know what, I just don't understand like all the complexities of this discussion, but I understand that I'm just going to follow God's word, right? And he says this, one of the purposes is this, to give the instruction, to give meaning to even people who are just simple-minded. So we're going to see Proverbs that you read and you think like, in some way, I get it, it's so basic and simple. Why did they even write it down? They wrote it down for that. Knowledge and, I love this, discretion to the youth. How many of you would say the youthful version of you could have used a little more knowledge and discretion? Yeah. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. So here's the idea. Let the wise hear and increase in learning. How many of you feel like there is sometimes a tendency, like maybe you reach a certain competency, maybe in your job or something, and you think like, I made it across the finish line. I don't really have to like study or learn more. Like I have a passable knowledge base for the rest of my career. I don't have to know anything else. You know what I'm talking about? And people begin to mail it in. Maybe you deal with some people like that where you're like, I don't feel like they've done any like career development in decades. He's saying this, Proverbs is for the wise, the ones who are already considered able to take the knowledge that God has given them and put it into practice. It's for them to even continue to grow. That's good news. And the one who understands to obtain guidance. Even those who already understand can still deepen their understanding of how to be guided. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. I gave you an example of a proverbial riddle about the oxen poop bucket. There are riddles in there that you look at it and you think, like, what is going on? I'm very confused. And it takes time. And sometimes you get it. Sometimes you go looking for a resource and you get it. And almost always, when you solve a riddle, how do you feel? You feel a little proud of yourself. You got a little smirk on your mouth like, wow, I did it, right? Proverbs even has that. So this is the purpose. The purpose is to do all of these things. And then here is kind of the foundation of the entire book. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So what is fear of the Lord? Let's just talk about it. We talked about it very briefly, but let's just make sure we're on the same page here. Where's my pen? What does it mean to fear the Lord? Okay, so there's a level of respect. Okay, seriousness. Elaborate a little bit. What's that? Yeah, obedience. I like that word, honor.
Knowledge.
Okay, I'll stop right here. I like these two words the most in our list so far because I think at the core, this is what the idea is. I like that no one said like tremble and fall to the ground scared because it's not that. The idea is this level of awe, but I like these words respect and honor because fearing the Lord is this idea of recognizing who God is and what God has done and continues to do. Name some of the things God has done. He created all things. Wow, are you in awe of that when you really stop and think about it? Solomon is saying when you really begin to recognize who God is, all of these words start coming to mind because God starts being set on his throne in his proper place, and when he is, you get put in your proper place. And what is your proper place? Lowly before him, right? And when that happens, then you are a person who is ready to receive knowledge. So I think here is a challenge just in your personal life. Maybe begin to ask yourselves questions. Day to day, if I just pause, let's say tomorrow at 1:30, set an alarm, forget about it. When the alarm goes off, ask yourself this question. In this very moment, where do I feel like I stand today, and where is God? These are important questions because Proverbs is saying if you want to move forward and you really want to know how to live your life well with the knowledge that God has given and you want to live it out in real time, you want to apply it like a craftsman to a piece of wood, you have to remember who God is. If you forget who God is, all of this will just be head knowledge that will puff you up and you will become the king of your own life. And it will actually do the exact opposite of what it's intended to do. So the foundation of the whole book is this healthy awe and reverence rooted in the understanding of who God is and who you are. Let's see. Yeah, so knowledge is unapproachable. You're not able to grasp it without first knowing your relationship to God. Yeah, and we already talked about Adam and Eve. Okay, so here's the group question. Can you think of any ways Christians are tempted to live outside of the wisdom of God and to try to define good and evil for themselves? Now, this is not the low-hanging fruit of how does the secular world refuse to live under the wisdom of God? How many of you would just say, I could have a field day with that, like how much time you got? It's not that. It's a sobering look inward of how do Christians sometimes begin to live outside of the wisdom of God. Now, I'll give you a little hint on maybe a topic that would be a pretty easy one to start with. We are living in a place, I've said this from the pulpit before, where they make reality TV shows about where we live. Why is that? We are like the plastic surgery, money, sports car, beachside county for the world, right? How do those things begin to suck us in and we begin to live by that wisdom and not the wisdom set forth by God? So why don't you take 4 or 5 minutes and then we'll reconvene from there. All right, we don't have time to go table by table, but maybe 1 or 2 that want to share maybe something that struck you or part of your table discussion. Christians living outside of the wisdom of God, maybe even without even recognizing it. This is not an attack on people. Say it again. Your work. Elaborate a little bit.
Where your boss wants you to do something and your mind is saying it's really not the right path. But your job's dependent upon you doing something that you know is wrong.
Okay, so your job is calling you to do something that you know morally is not right. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think a lot of these things in our culture start with work. How about this? To get ahead in our culture, I'm willing to work 12-hour days, 7 days a week. I'll do whatever it takes. Would that be God's wisdom? Maybe. You're saying maybe. What's funny is I am kind of leaning with you. Tell me why you say maybe.
Because I think that if the Lord impresses on me in my heart that I have to do whatever it is that He wants me to do to be in that environment, I have to put in that time to do that.
Okay, so if God clearly has called me to it, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a missionary, whether it's abroad or right here in Orange, and there is an emergency that has called you into action, and this is who God called you to be. Would it be like, sorry, I can't really respond to the emergency right now. It's my day off. Is that what God's called us to do? Sunday. Yeah. But how about this? I own a house and 3 cars, and all my kids are in private school. But man, I'd really like another 0 at the end of my savings account, so I'm going for it. Okay, now we're talking about 2 totally different things. Same principle, 2 different things. I think this is important because part of the nuance is what is the call of God on your life. I would venture to guess that over time, God's not going to call a lot of people to 12-hour days, 7 days a week for decades on end. But God definitely calls us to respond to things in a way that might require us sacrificing comforts and time. I like that. And it all started with Scott's comment about work. See, this is how God's wisdom goes. Okay, one more, Pat.
At our table, we kind of talked about making decisions about what's right for yourself instead of leaning on God, consulting with God, and just making decisions for yourself. Well, I can have enough of that, and I can do this, and I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and there becomes things that slip into our culture that, in my opinion, become so normalized that we start to brush them off a little bit too. Let me give you an example. This used to happen all the time, but it was a good example. Teenagers. I was a youth pastor for a decade. So often teenagers would come to me and they would say, "Oh my gosh, I really want to stop cussing." Why is it that every teenager ever goes through these periods of time where they experiment with using the F word? Why is that? I'm being serious. Why is that? They hear it all the time. And is it that big of a deal? It depends on who you ask now, doesn't it? You may recall that a PG-13 movie 30 years ago was quite different than a PG-13 movie now, right? The line gets blurred. Even from when I was a kid, what kind of words were allowed on the radio to what's allowed now? Right? You begin to normalize it. The reason a kid who's like, I want to follow Jesus with my whole heart, these are not like kids who are just going by the wayside, come and say, I can't believe it, I was doing it. Why? Because the culture has been telling you, that's not a big deal. Maybe looking at porn or something is a big deal, but using the F word as an adjective and a noun in the same sentence, who cares, right? That's what begins to happen to us. We begin to decide what's right and wrong for ourselves instead of, you know what, I don't 100% understand why God set it up that way, but I understand that God has set it up that way, and I'm going to live that way and expect that God will reveal the reason why if he chooses to. Awesome. For the sake of time, let's move on. This is verse 8. This is one of those speeches from a father to a son. I think the more nuanced version would just be a parent to a child. How many of you know your parent to a child has a lot of wisdom? This is actually what Hebrews call the wisdom apprenticeship. That a parent's job is to give all that God has given them to their child. I think it's also set up as a father and son because in this culture, the firstborn son especially will inherit all of the honor and the wealth of the father. And Proverbs sets it up as one of the things that you want to inherit from your father is not just his property and his money, it's his wisdom. Hear, my son, your father's instructions, and forsake not your mother's teaching, for they are a graceful garland for your head and pendants for your neck. What is this image of a garland for your head and a pendant for your neck? What's that about? What's that? Victory. Okay, there's an element of victory. What else would somebody walking down the street with a garland on their head and a pendant on their neck? Okay, remembrance, what? They're wealthy. They have something they're proud of to display outwardly for others to see. So how is this an image of wisdom? When you live under the faithful instruction of your mother and your father who knew the Lord and passed it on to you, it's like going out in public and having something that says, look, I am proud of what I carry with me. And what do I carry with me? I carry with me the wisdom of God. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm going to live into it so much so that you will notice that it's something outwardly setting me apart. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. I think it's in your footnotes. This word entice is a really cool word because I believe it's what Jesus draws on when he says, go by the narrow way, not the wide path. The idea of to entice is literally the wide or spacious way. Why does that mean to entice? It's this idea. It alludes to the idea of alluring someone into a way of life that promises to be easier, comfortable, and more simple. It promises that. Does it deliver on the promise? It might for a short period of time. It might. How many of you know that there are certain times, how many of you would say in the short term it might actually be easier just to cut off a relationship that you feel like is really hard to manage? And just say, I forget you, I'm not dealing with you anymore, done. blocked on Facebook, Instagram, whatever you're on, moving on with my life. How many of you would say in the short term, that might actually literally be easier? In the long term, what would it look like to do the hard work of reconciliation and repenting and acknowledging all the ways that you've hurt another person and they've hurt you? This is the image of how strong bonds of real friendship and relationship are forged in the Bible, aren't they? So in the long term, is it actually better and more comfortable? No, it actually leads to the opposite. It leads to loneliness, and it leads to narcissists who just cut everyone off. If they entice you, don't consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without reason. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive and whole like those who go down to the pit. How many of you are feeling like, man, we just went from being enticed to sin to murdering people in cold blood pretty fast there? Why do you think Proverbs is doing that? It is showing you the end result of what happens when you give your life over to sin. And what is it? You bring destruction and death and darkness with you. You hang out with the company of people who think it's fun to bring death and destruction with them. And the whole, like those who go down to the pit. Verse 13. We shall find all precious goods. We shall fill our houses with plunder. AKA, we will take all that other people worked hard for, people of character and integrity. I heard today that it just takes an idiot to tear down a bridge. It takes a lot of masterful craftspeople to build it. They are not equivalent. The amount of people given a platform to tear down beautiful things that only very specific people have the skill and ability to build is a huge problem. The Bible is saying it right now. Let's just go steal the stuff that people, hardworking people, earn for themselves. Insert joke about taxation here. No? All right. Verse 15. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their paths. What do you hear the father saying? What would you guess his tone of voice is? We don't know, but what would you guess his tone of voice is?
Very direct.
Direct, please. Don't go down that path. It's not worth it. Please, I'm begging you. If this opportunity ever comes up, listen, it might seem like it's a big path that leads to comfort, but it's the exact opposite. Trust me, I've lived more life than you. I've shown you with my life what hard work and character looks like, and this is not the way to do it. For their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. For in vain is a net spread in the sight of any bird. It's an interesting little proverbial saying. What does that mean? In vain a net is spread in the sight of any bird. Yeah, if you're going to try to trap a bird, do you get the net ready and say, like, here, bird, come on? Yeah. Anybody ever tried to catch a duck before? My 5-year-old tries to catch the ducks, and he hasn't figured this out yet. If you wanted to catch a duck, what would you have to do? You have to ambush it quickly, right? Yeah, not like, here's a piece of bread, come and eat it, right? That's not going to work. So what is he saying? In vain is a net spread in the sight. It's worthless to spread the net to try to catch the bird. What are the evil people doing? They're scheming behind the scenes secretly on how to catch the bird. But these men lie in wait for their own blood. Ooh, that just took a big twist. So they're out for the blood of others, but what is literally the end result of this path of life? It will be their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives. Such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessor. Okay, so please, please, please don't step your foot in the direction of sin. It leads to these terrible things. And what is the end result of living that life? How does it end? It will ambush you. Your sin will turn on you, and it will ambush you, and it will lead to your demise and your death. For the sake of time, we're going to have to skip this group discussion question, but I encourage you to read it. I want to finish this proverb. We'll go quickly because I think the end is something really interesting. Wisdom cries out in the street. It's very important to note that throughout the Proverbs, wisdom is personified as, anybody know? Lady Wisdom. Yeah, Lady Wisdom. We'll talk about it when it comes up. Wisdom whispers quietly in a dark alley. It cries aloud in the streets, in the markets. This is where all the people are gathered. She raises her voice. At the head of the noisy street, she cries out. At the entrance of the city gate where people enter, she speaks. So what is the image here? Wisdom is begging to be heard. Wisdom is not making itself a secret. It's intentionally wanting you to recognize it and how it governs the world. So why, if it's that accessible, why don't people hear it? Okay, they don't want to. Why? Verse 7, what's the whole foundation? They don't fear the Lord. And if you don't fear the Lord, you don't know who God is and you don't know your rightful place. And if you don't know that, then why would you look for anyone else's wisdom except my own? Because mine is good enough. And so wisdom is screaming in your face, listen to me, and your ear is not tuned to hear it. You just hear noise and you can't understand. And this is what wisdom says. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? The word simple in the ESV is kind of a bummer because I think what it's getting at is dumb. You dumb, you heart of heart, I think is a good translation. How long will you just live in your hard-heartedness? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing? What is scoffing? That's dumb. Oh, the dumbest things I ever heard. Every single one, at least of you guys, had one of those friends in high school, by the way. It's like straight out of a movie. One of your friends was cast to be that person. How many of you can yeah, actually, I can think of that person. Hey, why don't we do this? Pfft, that's a dumb idea. Right? Well, you've never had an original idea in your life. You just sit back and pfft, that's dumb to everything. Okay. That's a scoffer. Where was I? What verse? Somebody tell me. 23. And fools hate knowledge. If you turn at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my spirit to you. Does that sound familiar? By the way, Jesus knew these proverbs like the back of his hand, by the way. We'll get into some of these. Some of these are like Jesus not only knew the wisdom tradition, he creates his own that are so perfect and beautiful. You could just copy them right out of the New Testament and put them in Proverbs and they'd fit forever. Because I have called you and you refused to listen. She says at the end of 23, I will make my words known to you. It's not a secret. I'll teach you the words. Because I have called and you refused to listen. Have stretched out my hand and no one has heeded. It's this image of wisdom saying, here, grab a hold, and nobody's even grabbing the hand back. I would say, I was reading a commentary, wisdom is the lifeboat reaching down your hand as you wallow in the sea of sin, and you saying, no, I'll swim to shore. That's kind of what it's like. Because you have ignored all my counsel and would have none of my reproof, I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when terror strikes you. I don't think this is literally the wisdom or God saying, I'm going to laugh at your misfortune. I think this is a figure of speech to say, look, the very thing that you have done to wisdom when it was offered to you is what the feeling will flood over you when you're experiencing it. So here's the idea that I think we should get. Wisdom of God is not an emergency tactic. It's not, I have we have emergency first aid kits and we put them on the wall. And you just walk past them all the time. So much so you forget they're even there. But if you have an emergency, what can you do? Run and go get it. That is not the wisdom of God. The wisdom of God is not something that says, oh no, it's all hitting the fan, everything's going bad. I'm going to run over there and figure out what good formula from the book of Proverbs to use. That's not wisdom. Wisdom is the daily recognition and fear of the Lord that you live into it, that when things happen, you say, I recognize what this is. This is a temptation to step towards sin, and I know where that leads. And even if I don't fully understand, I'm going to step towards the wisdom of God because I know where that leads. It leads to life everlasting. So wisdom says, I'll laugh in your calamity, mock when terror strikes you. When terror strikes you like a storm, and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, then they will call on me. You see how that works? I've refused to listen at the gates in the marketplace when you're shouting at me. I've refused to take your hand when you offered it to me. But when it gets really bad, then I'm like, hey, can you come back and let me try again? They will call on me and I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me. Because they hated knowledge, they did not choose the fear of the Lord. They didn't choose that as the foundation of how they organized and understood how to live a good and fruitful life. They would have none of my counsel. They despised all of my reproof. Therefore, they shall eat the fruit of their way and have their fill of their own devices. Can anyone think of a proverb that would fit very nicely as a commentary to verse 31? They shall eat the fruit of their way. You reap what you sow. A dog returns to its own vomit. You will eat the fruit of their way. Fruit is, in the Bible, it is the culmination, the production that comes out of your heart. So what does Galatians say? The fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. I can't remember which one it is. I always say it to my son, and he memorized it at school, and I always forget one of them, and he corrects me. And it's like a pride check to be corrected by a 5-year-old on a Bible verse when you're... But he does. This is the fruit that comes out of a heart that's turned towards Jesus, that knows the fear of the Lord. But they will eat the fruit of their way. It'll be a bitter, dark fruit. For the simple are killed by the turning away, and the complacency of fools destroys them. What does complacency mean? Their refusal to put their hand to the plow and work. But whoever listens to me will dwell secure and will be at ease without dread of disaster. It's a good promise that your security is found in the Lord. And even when tumult and all sorts of terrible things come up, the one who knows the fear of the Lord, knows the wisdom of the Lord, they settle back into what reality? That I dwell in a secure place, I can be at ease, and I do not dread the disaster. I know where the path, the straight and narrow path that I'm on, I know where it leads. And even though this section of this path is difficult and challenging, I know where this leads, and I will not veer off the path. Again, I'd encourage you to take the question home. If you don't already, lots of people like to hole punch their outlines and just keep them in a binder. That's what I like to do. I'd encourage you to do the same. But I'd like to pray for you. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry for going over a little bit, but you're always free to fellowship and hang out. We'll flip on some music. As always, you have like probably 3 or 4 minutes to get the food you want, because once the youth group is dismissed, they're going to clean it out. So just so you know. God, thank you for your word. And thank you that you've made wisdom accessible to us. Thank you that you are shouting it from the gates in the marketplace. And we want to tune our ears. We want to see with our eyes. We don't want to miss it. And so, God, I pray against any temptation to just accumulate more knowledge, that we would be smarter people. But instead, I pray for a deep transformation of our hearts as we dive into the book of Proverbs together. I pray that it wouldn't just be an academic exercise to learn more about a really cool book, and it is that, but it's so much more. We want you to begin to poke and prod, to plant seeds deeply in us, that we would produce great fruit. So God, would you help us to be people who walk out, that we're good at life, not because we have good ideas or we're smart or we're powerful, but because we begin every day with the fear of the Lord. We know who you are. We recognize you're the only one worthy of our awe and our honor, and we give it to you. So go before us into the rest of our week. Amen. Amen.